Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us today. It's good to see so many familiar faces. My name is Deepam, the Center Manager for Strangun and Sengkang Learning Center, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Now, we will be having a Q&A session after the webinar, and it'll take roughly about 10 to 15 minutes. Our speakers are from the DAS Academy, and our learning centers will be answering your questions live. Now, should you have any questions regarding the webinar, as said before, there's always a Q&A feature. You can actually write in there, okay? If you're interested in any of our courses or workshops related to this talk, we will be featuring some upcoming courses, the one that's in the next few months, and the links will also be posted during the chat box. Now, without further ado, let's begin our talk. Please sit back, enjoy, and see you shortly. Over to you, Priscilla.
Thank you, Dee. Hi, everyone. A very good afternoon. Thanks for spending your lunch hour with us today to learn more about how we can help our children in learning Chinese. So just let me share screen. Okay, I hope everyone sees my screen here. Right, so I'm very sure that some of y'all may have experienced some pains of, helping children in learning Chinese. Some of them maybe do not like to learn Chinese. Some of them, they may, find that Chinese is too difficult to learn and they struggle a lot with it. So how can we help children, learn Chinese or even, be exposed to Chinese without the sense of fear and also tears. Okay, so what I'm going to be sharing with you, this is the outline for today's webinar, is that I'm just going to be briefly mention about dyslexia, and then what is the dual language development process for our children, because we know that our children are considered bilingual learners in Singapore. They learn two languages. It's not just one language. It's not just Chinese itself or English itself. And how can we make Chinese learning fun? So I'm just going to be sharing some tips and some creative ideas on how can we make Chinese learning more fun for our children. And then at the end, also some useful resources that you can check out on the website or download the applications for your children to use. Right, so what is dyslexia? So basically, dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty that is neurological in origin. All right, so some children are born with dyslexia. That is, a difficulty that is brain-based. Certain parts of their brain have certain struggles in matching speech sounds with the word text that they hear and also they see. All right, so they are categorized by their difficulties in terms of their word recognition, poor spelling, and decoding ability. So decoding means that when they see a word text, they have difficulty making out the sounds or even be able to tell you what they think the word sounds like to them. All right, and this is also due to a deficit in phonological component of the language. So that means somewhat and somehow the brain have some difficulty in matching up what they hear in the language and what they see when they read books or when you write it out for them to see. So so somehow, naturally our brains try to make that kind of association, the words that I've heard before, and then when they see the word, then they will be thinking like, oh yeah, okay, I heard mommy say this before, or I heard my teacher say this word before, and I see it printed on a page or on a board and or in the storybook. So for children with dyslexia, this is not a natural process for them. So they, even though they have pretty good cognitive abilities like average or even above average intellectual abilities, or they have very good logical reasoning and so on, or despite the fact that they've been to school, they have received additional support, they have received a good set of instructions on how to read and spell, but somehow they still struggle a lot with their reading and spelling. So these are actually the red flag symptoms of dyslexia. Okay, and because of their difficulty in their reading and spelling, that actually leads on to their difficulty in reading comprehension and also the reduced reading experience, because they find it too difficult to engage with the words that they read. They tend to not want to experience the pain, and therefore they avoid reading altogether, and that makes them falling much more behind from their peers. All right, so this dyslexia actually affects about 5 to 20% of school age population, and dyslexia is a language-based difficulty, right? So generally, any individual who are diagnosed with dyslexia, they would have difficulties in learning how to read and spell in general, regardless of the language that they're exposed to. All right, but the extent of these dyslexic type difficulties can be manifested quite differently in different languages, depending on how strong they are in certain cognitive functions, and also depends on the nature of the language, how easy it is to be reading and spelling in English or even in Chinese. Okay, so what are our students learning in Singapore? These are the 4 official languages in Singapore. English is our main medium for instruction and communication, because we are a multicultural society, and Singapore adopts a bilingual education policy. So our children learn a mother tongue according to their ethnicity. So for this webinar, we are looking at our bilingual children learning Chinese as their mother tongue, right? And our children are also considered simultaneous bilingual children. Why so? Because they are exposed to and they are given the opportunities to learn these 2 languages since young, since birth, all right? And even shortly after when they start schooling. So being a dual language learners of English and Chinese, they are actually exposed to learning the 2 languages that have very different print sound mapping system. So that means, you know, the words that they hear and the text that's written, they are actually following 2 different sets of system. All right, so how different are they? So this is what I'm going to be sharing in the next couple of slides. All right, so for English language, it is considered an alphabetic language. All right, so that it comprises of 26 letters in an alphabet that makes up 44 different sets of sounds. All right, so in fact for English, it is it's a pretty much straightforward language, whereby you can just apply phonics to blend the sounds into words. For example, when you see the letter B, you can link it to boy, B sound. And you see the letter A, you link it to A as in apple. And then when you see a letter T, you can link the sound T to the word top, right? So when you see these 3 letters put together, you can apply phonics based on what you know the letters, the sound that the letters make. So B, A, T, bat. So you can actually put them together and you can sound it out. So even if you have not seen the word before, you have not learned the word before, you can still apply phonics to blend the sounds and learn how to read the word before you can try to understand what the word means. All right, so approximately 86% of English words are considered regular. So you generally can apply certain sound rules, spelling rules to help you to be able to read and spell pretty much most of the time. All right, however, of course, there is still a small percentage of English words that are considered irregular, so you still have to use certain memory work to get children to actually memorize certain words. Other than that, they can apply phonics, and it's much easier language as compared to I would say Chinese in terms of transparency. Okay, and it is an atonal language as compared to Chinese, which is a tonal language. Okay, so for Chinese, it is non-alphabetic. It is actually logographic script. So basically how Chinese words are created is based on pictures and lines that represent symbols, that represent objects, and also that represents meaning. All right, so 90%, I would say, of the Chinese characters are made up of 2 main components. One is your semantic radical, which what we call the 偏旁. So it gives generally the meaning of the word. All right. And then the other component is the phonetic radical, which is the 声旁, that gives you some clues of how these Chinese word would sound like. All right. And I believe some of y'all would have gone through learning Chinese with this general rule of thumb: 有边读边，没边读上下、中间、旁边, or whichever, right? Okay, so actually, right, because of how Chinese words are being created, all right, actually the 有边读边 rule of thumb, accuracy is actually about 26% of the time. So you cannot just 有边读边, you cannot just depend on the phonetic sounds, all right, of the language to try to, learn or read or even recognize Chinese itself. You need to understand how it's formed. You need to understand what it means. Okay, so this is just some example. For example, if you learn ma, all right, so when ma appears in a different word, let's say for example with a 口字旁, it becomes ma because the language itself is tonal and therefore the tone change as well, and the meaning itself change from horse to a word that is associated with asking a question. And then you have a 女字旁 with a ma, which is 妈妈的妈, and then you have a 石字旁, which is 码头的码. All right. And also 骂人的骂 with 2 口 at the top. But also, in Chinese, we also have irregular words such as 冯, which also have the 马字. All right. However, with a different 偏旁, it actually gives a different sound. So that's why we can't, rely too much on just 有边读边. All right. And then also this 马字 can also become the 偏旁, which is the semantic radical representation of the word. It gives a meaning, which is 骑, which means riding a horse. All right. So for children to actually learn Chinese, it's not just, having that set of phonetic skills for them to learn how to decode or try to make sense of what this word may sound like. They also may require some visual skills to discriminate some visually similar looking words but of different meaning, and also at the same time some visual memory work for them, because they also need to remember which part of the word is located within the character itself, and also how it is matched up with the other words to form bigger meanings. All right. So now that you understand that English and Chinese do have 2 different types of sound and text matching system. All right. When children actually learn 2 languages, they also develop their language skills through 2 different parts of 2-part process, all right, which is firstly the language culture connection and also the language cognition connection. All right, the language culture connection explains that it's a process whereby you link the language with a cultural group. All right, so when a child learns Chinese language, they are trying to associate themselves with the Chinese culture, with the Chinese ethnic group, and they learn how to use this language to communicate and also mediate with the culture. All right, for language cognition connection, it means that we actually need to acquire or require certain set of skills, okay, that help them with word recognition, with word processing and word reading and spelling, in order for them to be able to cope with the language learning itself. So when a child learns 2 languages, you need to understand that they need to go through both connections in order to learn well. Okay, so how can we help children establish the language culture connection? So firstly, children, they actually socialize into their culture through language. So it also depends very much on who the child talks with, who talks to the child, what is communicated using the language, and how it is being communicated in the language. All right, I have children who told me that, Chinese, I only use it when I talk to my grandma, or Chinese, I only use it in Chinese class. I don't use it in other situations. So actually, in a way, so their connection is very limited to the limited social circumstances or the social situations in using the language itself. Okay, so and some children, when they actually learn two languages, it's actually interwoven into both the culture and also the linguistic identities. All right, because when they learn a language, when they use it in their culture, they are forming an identity about themselves. All right, I mean, if they are Chinese, Singaporean Chinese or Singaporeans of Chinese ethnicity, they need to learn how to associate themselves with the language and the culture as well. I mean, given that Singapore is quite a rojak, multicultural society, we tend to mix around with other languages like the Malay and a bit of Tamil and dialects and so on and so forth. That actually forms a very unique, Singapore identity as well. So we can actually never run away from culture. All right. So it is very important that we always make a connection between culture and language. Erasing cultural patterns in a language is actually not very helpful for children in learning the language itself. Okay, so a lot of children, they actually do see Chinese as a problem because they mostly associate Chinese as specific to a situation whereby they have to learn 听写 or they have to do 测验 and nothing else, and they don't see it as any usefulness or meaningful or any meaning in terms of using the Chinese itself. So we have to actually give children a lot of opportunities to socialize with the language. We can try unconventional methods. It's not just about giving them a tablet and then get them to play some games in Chinese and then hopefully they can absorb the language itself. It's actually more of the willingness and also the interest in engaging them in all these unconventional methods. Okay, and also we can help them. We also have to help them in terms of learning how to appreciate the language through literary or even art forms. All right, especially if children like to use art. If you are working with younger children, a lot of hands-on activities are actually very important for them to actually build the language skills. So socializing with the language, we can try to make language practical as much as possible for them. TV programs, radio stations in Chinese language is actually, in fact, one good source of building up their Chinese language. When we talk about learning Chinese, we talk about 4 different ways of engaging in the language itself. Firstly is listening, speaking, reading, and also writing. So in Chinese we call 听说读写, right? So how can we actually make immerse children into learning the language itself easier? Is we start off with 先听说 and then 后读写. All right, so that means they start off with listening, communicating, speaking. And then subsequently, when they get comfortable with the language, they can then be more open to reading Chinese words or even writing Chinese words itself. All right, so one good source is that they, if they are engaged in a very interesting radio station program or a TV program, that actually get them be more open and more willing to be exposed to the language itself. Or if you keep a pet, you can also find some opportunity for them to communicate with a pet, or get them to read to a pet, or even to teach a pet a new tongue. Instead of commanding the pet to sit in English, you can command the pet to sit in Chinese, right? 坐 instead of sit, things like that. Okay, so these are actually very in a way, practical situations to help children be more to be able to socialize with the language. Okay, and this other video, this is actually a project with McDonald's, I think quite a few years ago, whereby they encourage children to sing this song in order for them to get a free Happy Meal. All right, so I'm just going to play it for you to listen.
芝士汉堡炸鸡块，苹果片玉米鲜奶，薯条橙汁冰淇淋，学习花一张开心。大家来点开心餐，下次点餐不再难，下次点餐不再难。
All right, Okay, so you can see that, you know, in order for them to be able to order, they need to learn how to sing this or say these food items in Chinese. All right. So actually reading menus and teaching them how to order food in Chinese is also making the language more useful, practical, and meaningful for them. Okay, and then this is also some example that we can actually make, you know, socializing of the language more fun by immersing them into the tradition or the culture. So this is just one example of, you know, we actually create, or you can actually explore creating puppets, all right, just by coloring a paper and stick it on a stick, and then we can reenact a story, okay, and then they learn how to say certain dialogue in Chinese itself. Okay, so they kind of make it fun and enjoyable for students and children as well. Okay, the other one, you know, is like some children, they actually like to use paints. You know, we can actually use the Chinese New Year, get them to write Chun Lian. And I mean, of course, some children, they may not be able to, you know, write in proper strokes, or they find it very stressful to actually write it. What we can actually do is that we can actually print out, you know, the word. If you can see the picture, all right, we actually print out, you know, you can actually print out the word and then get the student to use paint to trace it out. All right, so at least, you know, they can actually feel that sense of like, oh, you know, I can also be like a calligrapher and write Chun Lian for people and things like that. So this is also one of the fun ways to do so. Or you can even use Play-Doh to make mooncakes, especially during Mid-Autumn Festival. If you know your children are too young, you can actually use Play-Doh to do it, or you can also use flour, water, and food dye. Get them to actually make mooncakes. And in fact, the story about mooncakes, you can also expose this to the children, is that, you know, during the Ming dynasty, you know, they actually have this war to overthrow the Mongolian rulers in China. And why mooncakes? In the middle, you have the egg yolk. In the past, they don't use the egg yolk. They actually put in secret messages inside the mooncake, you know, to actually inform the soldiers that they want to overthrow the Mongolians on the 15th day of the 8th lunar month. All right, so it's very interesting. You can teach them, you know, some history, some culture, and at the same time it's fun for them. You can get them to, you know, write secret messages in Chinese, or in fact, if they can't really write, you can, you know, write for them and get them to read, or you can even, you know, use their, you know, their spelling list, their 听写字, right, and then you write it inside, you stuff it inside the Play-Doh, and you get them to go and do a treasure hunt or something like that for the mooncakes. All right, so this is just something that is more fun for children. Okay, and for the language cognition connection, so basically there are 4 main skills that are essential, all right, in learning language itself. Firstly is the phonological sensitivity, so being able to associate speech sounds of a language to the text. So the more sensitive you are with the print sound, the better you are as a reader. So it's also more about, you know, how we can link Hanyu Pinyin with the actual Chinese words itself. Okay, morphological awareness is actually, you know, being able to understand the meaning of language and how we can put meaningful parts of a language together. For example, if let's say the child learns the word Mao as in cat, so we can actually expose them a bit more by telling them that Mao can match with 小猫 as in small kitten, or 大猫 as a big cat, 黄猫 as a ginger cat, 黑猫 as a black cat, things like that. So, you know, at least they know that the word that I learned is not just in isolation. I can use it creatively to build other word meanings. Okay. And the other one is orthographic knowledge, basically is to understand how word is being formed and written. So exposing them to 偏旁, 声旁, 笔画, 笔顺, all these are very important for them to actually learn the language itself. Fluency is basically rapid naming, so being able to recognize words automatically and quickly. So how can we actually build these skills? through various activities that can engage our children. Mostly you have to ensure that, you know, we use a multisensory mode of learning. So how can we do that? So I'm just going to share a couple of the next few slides. All right, so we can actually create some in-house learning materials or even games. I think young children, they love games. Even upper primary, some of them, they also like to, you know, engage in a more fun activities than just paper and pen and sitting at a desk practicing their things here. All right, so you can actually have words, all right, in Chinese and also the, you know, the matching one in English, if let's say they are still trying to, you know, get used to both languages. So you can do things like, you know, showing them a picture card, and then they have to go out to find, you know, the correct words to match, or you can show them the actual item. All right, or you can even tell them, all right, like, okay, it has 4 legs and I can sit on it, what is it? And then get them to tell you the Chinese representation itself, or go and look for the word card itself. All right, so if let's say the child is pretty good with their, you know, listening skills in Chinese, you can, don't need to say it in English, you can say in Chinese. Okay, 他有4只脚，我可以坐在在他身上，所以它是什么东西？ Okay, so you can say things like that and then get them to look for words. Okay, so this is one fun activity that you can also get the child to do, which is what we call the 水写簿. You can actually buy it from Taobao. All right, it's not very expensive. So basically, you can use water. You just use plain water and you write on it, and the water disappears, and the child gets to practice writing other words also. And it's very fun. All right, they can imagine themselves as calligrapher and then, you know, practice writing words itself and familiarize themselves with the word form. Alternatively, you can use chalk and write it on you know, cement floor and so on. All right, I've seen some parents actually do that, even getting them to practice things here using chalk and the cement floor. I think that these are actually very fun engagement mode, and it's actually multisensory because they get to use their hands to write. They feel the motor movements of it. They can see it forming in front of them, so there's a lot of visual input. And then if you get them to say it, you are actually putting an auditory input itself. All right. This is also some fun artwork that you can do, like using glitter glue. Get children to actually write it on cards, and then after that, when it dries, they can use their fingertips to trace over it and practice a few more times. All right, and then if you are trying to expose them to 身旁 and 偏旁, you can actually use different colors for them to see, you know, how words are actually formed. All right, so this builds up the orthographic knowledge as well. Okay, this is also one example using the sand tray, getting the student to trace the word and saying it at the same time.
马马
Okay, all right. Or you can also use Play-Doh. Okay, and then you just print out the word, and then the child use the Play-Doh following the correct sequence. They trace out, they put out the writing of the word itself. Okay, but if you use a permanent clay or puffy dough or something like that, I know some of them, they can actually harden and stick onto the paper, and you can actually keep using it for a few times, and then you can keep reusing the cards to build up more automaticity and also faster word recognition for them. Okay, all right, and then of course, you know, tapping on the child's stronger language or more comfortable language through use of bilingual books can actually help them transfer these language skills onto their weaker language. All right, so at least, you know, they do not feel that kind of fear when they see Chinese books only, like, you know, just full of a page full of Chinese words only, but they do see some English words that makes them feel a bit more calmer, and they can look at the English words for meaning and then read the Chinese words to see the, you know, the translation between the two languages. Okay, so you have to know your child's language abilities. Of course, you can start off with single words to then slowly with sentences and so on. All right, and of course, at the same time, you have to be emotionally sound. So praise the effort when they try their very best to read in Chinese. Don't laugh at them when they are, you know, when they mispronounce a word and stuff like that. Just repeat it with them and get the child to repeat after you. All right, so what we want to see is the effort that they put in and not really the end product. I think this is something that we need to also let that children sense that, you know, we are not trying to judge you by, you know, the way you speak and so on and so forth, or the way you read it. Is actually the process of, you know, you wanting to put in the effort of learning it. Okay. So these are just some useful resources. You can actually go to these websites for bilingual books and resources. And then also, actually, in fact, our MOE has a website whereby, you know, you can actually go online and you know, do some Chinese activities with your children as well. It actually follows the primary school curriculum. All right, and then these are some applications that you can actually explore. 悟空识字, it has the 汉语拼音 version, and you also have the 识字 version. So you can download both. It's very fun. I think they have their first few initial stages are free. So if let's say your child gets the hang of it, you can actually purchase. It's not too expensive, but for, you know, if you want to look at your ROI, then, you know, get your children to try out the first few stages first and see whether they actually like it. It's quite fun. It includes, like, you know, stroke writing, word recognition, and then they have to use the word recognition to help fight the demons, you know, like Sun Wukong will fight the 三打白骨精 and all these, and then so they have all these kind of scenes for them to battle by recognizing Chinese words. Okay, Chinese Easy and Chinese Strokes Order, you can also download the application for them to actually learn the strokes and word recognition as well. So these are actually pretty useful applications and resources for your children, for you and your children as well. Okay, so yeah, I think given the time, I think this is my second last slide. All right, so so just bear in mind, actually, you know, in fact, I know quite a few children with dyslexia, they do struggle a lot with Chinese. However, you need to think of the strengths that they have. They are actually highly imaginative and visual thinker, and they have a lot of ability to look at the big picture. So tap on all these strengths, you know, their creativity, their intuitiveness, you know, get them to actually learn through different modes of learning, different styles, different types of activities to engage them. Can harness on their strengths to help them learn Chinese well. So I hope that, you know, some of the ideas that I have shared with you here are, you know, useful. And I don't think all the ideas I've shared are completely new, and some of y'all may have already tried some. I think what is most important is actually perseverance and also giving them a lot of exposure. All right, so what I've shared here is actually just the tip of the iceberg. So if you really want to learn more about the tips that I've shared today, I think you can also check out the courses that we actually offer on how to support the struggling learners. We have a workshop. We have 1 3-hour workshop and 2 certificate courses, which I think Dee will be sharing much more later on. Okay, all right, so with this, I have come to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for your time. I will try to answer some of the questions that you have posed. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Priscilla. Interesting. I like the video, the little McDonald thing. It was quite cute. Even the beat was. I'm quite sure children will be quite taken. Anyway, thank you, everyone. And I hope you all had a fruitful understanding of this session today. Before we start the Q&A, just a few minutes, we would like to hear from you as we value your feedback. It's actually the feedback form. On our screen, we have shared the QR code for our feedback form, as well as links to other DAS sites for your reference, right? Do me a favor, please spare a minute or two to complete the feedback form for us. We will be sharing some of our upcoming courses for the DAS Academy, in which you can stay back after this session for the Q&A to answer your queries if you need to ask anything about the courses. Now, one of the upcoming courses that is coming up, right, is called the Certificate in Chinese Language Support, right? And that will be actually starting on the 28th to the 30th of June. Okay, yes. As you can see the link and a bit of the details there. Registration closes on the 23rd of June. All right, that's not too far. So think about this course. It's quite good, actually. Participants will gain an understanding of difficulties dyslexic children face when learning about the Chinese language. Participants will also be introduced to strategies that can actively engage children in building literacy skills such as orthographic and morphologic awareness, stroke formation and patterns, oracy skills, and comprehension and writing. Okay, as said before, registration closes on the 23rd of June. Okay, I'm quite sure you all had enough time to do the feedback and get to know a bit of the courses. Now we shall move on to our Q&A session. We will take roughly about 10 to 15 minutes, okay? Now, not to worry, we will try our best to answer as many questions as we can. So far, there are a few that have already come up into our chat group Q&A session. You can please post your question in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. All right, Chris and I will probably try and see. Some of it I think we've already answered. Okay, administrative stuff we've already answered. Now we have our speaker here, Assistant Head of DAS Academy, Priscilla, and is also a full-time lecturer in several other courses like Diploma in Special Education and Masters of Arts in Special Education Needs. Right? Priscilla will help to address some of the questions that have been put up. Okay, let's begin, Pris. Okay. You notice in yes, you've seen. Okay, you start off.
Okay. Right. Okay. I was just reading the question, so yeah, I was just a bit excited to answer some of the questions. I do see a few parents who mentioned about Chinese strokes, whether it's important, and then they despite the fact that my child has practiced a few times, they still can't quite remember how to help them. So just let me talk about strokes and remembering words. Actually, in fact, research have actually shown that learning to write Chinese in proper strokes actually do help improve their memory for words. Okay, it helps with word retrieval. It also helps with word recognition. So I know in school now there is not very strong emphasis in writing proper strokes as compared to during my time, even in my examinations, I'm tested on writing proper strokes. So actually, in fact, it is very helpful. It is helpful for children in general, but typically for typical children, even if let's say they don't actually learn in proper strokes, they somehow are able to still be able to recognize words and retrieve words pretty well. But however, if our children have dyslexia or some other form of learning difficulties, they may actually find it harder to remember words. So actually getting them to learn in proper stroke orders is pretty much important. So it is good to emphasize that at home as much as you can. You can, use some of the tips I've shared previously using the sand tray or glitter glue, even, finger paint and so on and so forth, depending on the likes, the interest of the child, get them to write in proper strokes as much as possible. I know some parents may mention that, my child, it's very difficult. My child is already maybe in upper primary school. He or she is already using strokes that is not in proper sequence. I'm not trying to say that you must force children to, change to 100% accurate stroke orders and stuff like that. But as much as possible, remind them to do so. You say hen is from left to right, don't write from right to left, at least, things like that. Or you write shu ze or something like that, don't go from the bottom to the top and stuff like that. So at least, as long as they can follow proper strokes as much as possible, somehow it does help. All right. And then of course some things that we have actually helped children with remembering their spelling list or words that they have actually learned before. You can actually put up word charts, a word wall in their bedroom or something like that, and you change it every other month or something like that. So at least when they there's a lot of visual exposure, they keep seeing the words. Occasionally they can use their fingers and trace over. If you can encourage children to do so, that actually can be very helpful for them. All right, so this is actually some tips that you can actually use, all right, to help children.
I think there's one on the primary 3 is the same thing that you just said as well.
Yes.
Cover the ma'am who had the primary 3 child.
Correct. Yeah. Some other ways, I think, to make learning and memorizing more meaningful, as I've mentioned, try to give them opportunities to socialize. If you know their spelling list well and you know that what are the words that they actually learned before, when you are out in the street, when you see on the signboards, when you see on the menu and things like that, you can actually, point it to the child and say that, hey, you know, you got this in your things here before. Can you know, are you able to recognize that? So make it like a bit of a habit or something like that. Then at least they can see that, you know, I don't only see these words in school or in a classroom in my school textbooks only. I can actually see it in real life. You know, it's being used in a daily life. Actually, in fact, right, the words that our children learn in primary school curriculum up to secondary school curriculum covers, I would say, 80 to 90% of the words that we actually normally use in our, you know, road signs and signboards and even newspapers. Okay, so if they are able to, you know, pick up all these words, in fact, they should be able to cope well, you know, in the social context as well. So it's just how are we going to make this association for them? Because for them, they can be very limited to their association to just school itself and exams. Okay, we want them to see it as a language that we can use in our culture, in our social situation, in the real world, right? Okay, so yeah, with all this kind of exposure, that actually creates greater awareness, and that actually helps them a lot in remembering words and recognizing words. Okay.
There's one here.
Mm.
It's from a parent as well. My primary 5 child able to understand and guess what the adult said in Chinese at that time. When he comes to read, he if no Hanyun pinyin, most of the times he has difficulty to read. Right? For writing, what he learned today, he can forget tomorrow. How do I help him, right, to recognize these words and also remember it longer? Yeah, so I think it's just a memory thing as well.
Yeah, it's also a memory thing. So I think you can try to use the some ideas I've shared previously. I think as we also mentioned that, I also mentioned that learning the language itself is 先听说再读写. So basically they need to learn how to listen, communicate well, and then they need to feel comfortable with the language in order for them to then gradually become more comfortable with reading and writing. So if at 听说 level, if they cannot really communicate and listen in, you know, at a very comfortable level in the language, they struggle a lot, even much more when it comes to reading and writing. So I think it all has to come together. All right. I mean, you have to also find opportunities for them to actually communicate in this language itself, so that they can see a link between what they have learned in school and what is being used and communicated in real life. All right. And I mean, I think word walls or notepads or word charts, things like that, you know, for our students can be very helpful. Using of colors can be also quite helpful for children, you know, especially if they tend to forget. You know, especially they learn things here today, tomorrow, when it comes to the actual things here itself, they can tend to forget. But colors can help with their visual memory as well. So they can, you know, color code, you know, some words that share the same 偏旁 or 身旁, or they share the same meaning and things like that. Actually, that can be pretty much helpful for them too.
Cool, right? For parents, yeah.
Okay.
We're coming to at least the last 5 minutes for the Q&A session. We'll try and wrap up with 1 or 2 more questions. Actually, from the questions, I see some of them are just memory problems, which you've already addressed. This one is quite interesting, actually. Where is this? How can we make Chinese learning fun? I think this we already went through. You had given quite a bit of fun elements. Maybe 1 or 2 you want to pick out and just tell, you know, the parent. Chris, if you think the pace of teaching in school is really fast and there's not enough time for the parents to teach at home, especially if you want to make activities fun, right?
Okay. Given that we have about 5 minutes, I think that question I will definitely would like to answer that. And also I think a couple of questions on Hanyu pinyin and tones. I think I'll also cover briefly on that, on those couple of questions. Okay, how can we make Chinese learning fun? I think as parents, all right, I think children, they already, you know, I think they have suffered enough in school learning. I mean, especially if they have very strict Chinese teachers and all, I think you will want to inject a bit more fun, you know, as a parent when they're actually learning it at home. So I would think that, you know, especially if your child is really very how to say, they have very negative reactions to learning Chinese, and my suggestion is don't don't talk so much about the curriculum yet with your child. Okay, I think you have to start with a good note with the child. Start with something fun. Get them to expose to learning the Chinese through a different unconventional method, to let them realize that Chinese is not as painful as they think it is because of the association they make in school and examination. Because with a more open with more willingness and openness from the child, that's when they start to become more more accepting.
Aware. Yeah, accepting and
Yeah,
aware.
more aware, and then they are more willing to
Willing,
learn the
exactly.
language better. Yeah, so I think it has to start from somewhere. I mean, if the teacher has already started them off in the curriculum, then you don't run the same race as the teacher. You do something different from what the teacher does, and then let them see that Chinese is not such a difficult language. Is actually quite fun. It's actually quite meaningful and practical for me. And in fact, I mean, I know sometimes we tend to look a lot at the end product, or the results, whether they pass things here or not, or fail things here or not. I mean, the things here list is never ending. Okay, I mean, they can have like 10 to 20 or sometimes a little bit more words. But if you know that your child is unable to cope with that amount of words, work out something with the child. I mean, it's like if the child is already struggling with learning 10 words, how about then, let's reduce to 5. Let's make sure that you learn these 5 words and you get these 5 words correct. Okay,
Yeah,
we try to use,
yeah.
we try to use colors, we try to use, some interesting creative way to get them to actually learn these words. And then their aim is to get these 5 words correct. Okay, it's okay the other words if you don't get it correct or not. I mean, of course, then gradually when the child gets more and more confident, you can start to increase the challenge a little bit more for them, right? So that at least they do not feel that kind of pressure from the teacher, and the same kind of pressure that they face from the teacher with you as well. Okay, and then with regards to the Hanyu pinyin, all right, my child tend to, with some children, they do actually have difficulty with Hanyu pinyin, which I can understand, but I think ultimately when it comes to mastering the language, right, it's recognizing the Chinese character as a whole. So Hanyu pinyin only helps them how to pronounce, understand how the words is being pronounced, and the tones as well. So I would say that you can actually play some rhyming words, rhyming Hanyu pinyin with them, like shuang, huang, wang, and things like that, to actually build up on that. And even for the tones, all right, I know some children, they get very confused with the first tone, second tone, and third tone. So there are some interesting creative way of coming up with a story, 第一声, 第二声, using the aeroplane action, 第二声, 第三声, and 第四声 for the landing and things like that. So they can make use of a story, or using the hand movements, making it very multisensory for them to remember the symbols for the different tones. Okay, so yeah, all right, so I hope my my answers help to satisfy some of the questions that you have. But yeah, I think subsequently we can still I mean, if you do have more questions, there are some avenue for them to
Sure.
pose, right?
I think that's basically what I'll be telling next. I suppose not to. Thanks, Pris. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
If you're unable to answer some of your questions, not to worry. Please feel free to write in. We will actually in the chat feature, and we will definitely be collecting all these questions and emailing you with the answers. All right. So don't worry if you're not able to answer your questions at this present moment. Right? Okay, thank you everybody for attending this talk and being such wonderful participants. Now, our next webinar will be getting your child's attention. Now, this is very interesting. It's going to be on the 6th of May. It's going to be on a Thursday. You may want to go to our website, all right, to find out more details and register if you can ASAP for the next one. All right. Now, coming to a bit of our courses that we offer in the DAS Academy. All right. The DAS Academy has courses that are relevant to this webinar and many links posted at this chat box. You may also visit the Academy, DAS Academy website for more other courses, but in due time, we only can share about roughly 2 to 3 right now so that it'll get your attention. All right. Now, the first one is going to be on the 22nd of May, right? It's a workshop. It's called Supporting Your Child in Chinese, right? The registration actually closes on the 19th of May, which is not too far away, right? The workshop aims to help attendees understand the difficulties dyslexic children face when learning the Chinese language as a second language, right? On the screen, as you can see, these are 3 upcoming ones, right? As well as the nature and structure of Chinese characters. Strategies for parents, caregivers to support their children with dyslexia in learning Chinese will be shared in this workshop. Okay. Now, the other one I actually went through just now. It's called the Certificate in Dyslexia and Chinese Language Support, right? It's going to be on the 28th to the 30th of June, and registration closes 23rd of June. Last one, right? It's called Certificate in, how do you say which one? Certificate in Supporting SPLD Learners in Advanced Chinese Literacy Skills. Now, this is interesting, right? It's actually quite informative. It's going to be on the 22nd and the 25th of November. You've got ample time to register, as registration closes on the 17th of November. Now, a bit more into the courses. This course will deepen participants' understanding of the types of difficulties SPLD learners face in advanced literacy in Chinese. All right. Participants will be equipped with strategies in working with more able and older learners who need higher order skills. Right. Those who have people who need to learn, this will be a really good course to actually check it out. Okay. With all these exciting courses that the DAS Academy has to offer, do post in, again, Q&A feature, any questions that you would like to. And if you've got some pressing questions that you would like to ask about the courses, do stay in after this. We will be able to answer some of your questions and queries, okay? Especially like if you're not sure how to sign up or you'd like us to explain a bit more of the courses, do stay in, all right? Okay, we've come to the end of the session today, the webinar. I hope you all had a good time. Do keep us informed, and if you need anything, just drop in a line, okay? If not, have a good weekend coming up. It's a long weekend. Stay safe and be happy.